The themes that each year we return to have to do with relationships that we encounter on the way to community. Friend, family, stranger, partner, adversary, and those will be our themes again in text studies this year as well. This evening I have the pleasure of beginning with you that process, and the passage that I've chosen for us this evening comes from the biblical book of Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes stands out in the Hebrew Bible. It is not so much about have faith or take heart as it is about use your head, which is pretty sobering and perhaps sometimes a little depressing. But it's a distinctive Hebrew Bible book in that regard. And the passage I've chosen this evening, I hope, proves stimulating for conversation. And, as is our custom, I've chosen a commentary as well. The idea being that perhaps some of us might feel a little hesitant to wade into a conversation about a scriptural passage, a scripture from our own tradition, let alone a scripture from someone else's. But a commentator opens the conversation for us and says, you know what? I have a question. And if the commentator has a question, I guess it's okay if we have some as well. If you look with me on the text study page in your handouts this evening, you'll see it's from the 4th chapter of the book of Ecclesiastes, verses 9 through 12. The text reads, this is my translation, by the way, so if you have questions about the actual terminology in our conversation, I'd be happy to tell you what I can. Better two than one. Their efforts will be rewarded. Because if they fall, one can pick up the other. But if a lone person falls, there's no one to pick them up. And if they sleep together, it's warm. But how can a lone person get warmer? And if someone tries to overpower a person, the two will stand against it. And the threefold cord isn't quickly broken. Now, one might think, and the passage that we've just read together is often interpreted as a high praise for friendships. Friendships of one person to another. The value of having a best friend, as it were. And there are such friendships described elsewhere in the Hebrew Bible. David and Jonathan come to mind, for example. And one might sense that that's what this passage in Ecclesiastes is about as well. Until you get to the last clause in the passage. What I mean to say is this. We've got two is better than one, two is better than one, two is better than one, no, wait a minute. It's suddenly three. Two, and then, mysteriously, the passage ends with a three-stranded, threefold cord. Now, we know from ancient Near Eastern literatures that it was quite common to construct a saying, an aphorism, by concluding with a surprising observation. It was a common way to construct wisdom sayings in the ancient Near East. I think I know what's coming. I think I know. No, wait a minute. That's not what I thought we were getting at. The point being that the surprise at the end of the passage forces you to rethink what you thought the passage was about all along. Our commentator this evening, a 20th century Jewish commentator by the name of Mordechai Zar Kavod, is alluding to that ancient practice when he says it's a saying in the form of a riddle. 2, 2, 2, watch out, 3. That threefold reference at the end of the passage doesn't seem to have been invented by the author of this selection from Ecclesiastes. We know from other references in ancient Near Eastern literature that a threefold cord, a three-stranded cord, was a common metaphor. It meant something really hard to break. Something like the modern hard as nails or stronger than dirt or something like that. You know, a reference that you already are familiar with. But what's surprising, as I said, in this passage from Ecclesiastes is, what is that old metaphorical reference to threefold cords doing at the end of a series of references to 2? What's the riddle, as Zar Kavod suggests? Why end that way? In that regard, I have a little picture to show you. Thank you. This photo was taken in May of 1968. It was Stan's 15th birthday, and he had a surprise party thrown for him. This was his dear friend Richard, and this is his other friend at whose house the party was held. And oh, it kind of looks like a threefold cord there, doesn't it? The crepe paper just wound together. Wait. A threefold cord. Not easily broken. And so for our conversation this evening, I'd ask that we begin with this. Do you have such precious, multi-sided friendships that you might imagine have something to do, perhaps, with what the passage from Ecclesiastes is getting at? 2 is better than 1, but 2 and 2 and 2, try for 3. Not just because the more, the better, but because of something about friendships that are enhanced if it's not just the 2 of you. Anybody have any initial reactions to that? Anybody here have a friendship of 3s? Now or in the past? Does it come to mind? Yes, please.
Just had two really close buddies met in junior high and still keep in touch with them.
And do you ever have any thoughts about the significance of the 2 buddies and the dynamic that comes with being 3 together?
The only thing I can think of is that our personalities are such that if it was just 2 of us, sometimes we get at each other's nerves, but having that third person means there's kind of a constant, you get like a bit of a refresher from both of them.
Yes.
In some ways, like each person gets that opportunity.
Yes, I think absolutely. At the very least, we can say there can be overwhelming responsibilities that come with an intense 2-sided relationship that are in fact strengthened if there are 3. Anybody else? Yes, please.
2 weeks ago, I visited my aunt and uncle in Chicago, and they're around 90-ish. And
Yes.
they've moved from their big house and their kids to a smaller place, and now a catered living kind of place where they'll spend the rest of their lives.
Yes.
And my Aunt Kathy said to me, your Uncle Paul is just driving me crazy. Maybe
Yes.
it's because we're so close
Yes.
by each other and all. But I came down to visit, and they both said to me, oh, this is just so great. And they were getting along, and they'd say things about one another to me.
Yes.
I've known them a long time, you know. And
Yes.
my aunt is my dad's sister, and we went to her church, and people said, are you two sisters? And she, of course, loved that. But their relationship, like that, at least for that weekend, and I haven't gotten back to them to say, well, how's things going now that I'm not there? But,
Yes.
yeah, it was fun.
Yes.
And it's just weird to think that they don't get along, but they do.
As if the riddle that Tsar Kavod is pointing to is, if you want a friendship of two to work, it better be a friendship of three. And let's try one more. Yes, please.
This is totally opposite, but I have 3 older brothers.
Yes.
One boy is a whole boy, 2 boys is a half a boy, 3 boys is no boy at all.
That it was very difficult in the context of a family.
Yeah.
Yes. And that it would have been different if there had been fewer. That's what you're thinking. That dynamic was not constructive.
And we saw the split, 2 against 1.
I see.
Against 1.
It's not a sure thing. Absolutely. If you take sides, if it's not a 3-stranded cord, if it's 2 against 1, then you're back a verse. 2 against 1. Yep, you have to have a relationship that draws the 3 together rather than separates them into camps. Well, I would imagine that if we thought a little bit more about our youth, about current relationships, the possibility that this passage is suggesting that intense two-party relationships somehow are nurtured and strengthened if they're part of a larger network of relationships rather than understood as exclusive of those connections, and that's what the verse might be getting at. 2 is better than 1, 2 is better than 1, 2 is better than 1, but 2 has its weaknesses that 3 can help to overcome. The second question that I've asked you to consider, and I would suggest that we take some time to talk about this at our tables, is in your booklets as well. Not only do you have friendships that might shed some light on this juxtaposition of 2s and 3s, but could this possibly have any implication for your Opportunity St. Paul work? Do any of you find the 2-sided relationships that sometimes are the nature of the work you're doing tough? And might there be a way to take the advice of Ecclesiastes and say, I wonder if there might be a 3rd side to this relationship that could help? So with that, let me just pose it for you one more time, and then I'd ask you to talk about, at your tables, both your personal relationships with groups of 3 rather than 2, but also the possibility that there might be a lesson here for Opportunity St. Paul work, that 1-on-1 is better than being alone. But is it possible that you could strengthen the 1-on-1 by adding a 3rd? So with that, with both of those questions on the table, I'd give you some time to talk among yourselves. Does anybody have a recollection or a current three-sided or multi-sided relationship, that thinking through it, in fact, makes your two-sided, one-on-one relationships all the better. Anybody have any more? Yes, please.
Well, we were just thinking that the actual, this whole Opportunity St. Paul experience
Yes.
is most volunteer experiences are volunteer to organization. We have volunteer to organization to another organization.
Aha.
And it does help. It strengthens.
And I would turn to Randy and say, an accident?
Well, he's our board chair.
Absolutely, part of the plan. Absolutely. That this experience of working in the community for the sake of the community would be inherently multidimensional. And that we wouldn't place you in the position of some lonely and desperate and difficult one-on-one relationship that may or may not on any given day prove satisfying or affirming or may come with those frustrations which a broader context for the work helps to alleviate. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Any others? Any others? Either relationship systems that come to mind that work well because they're bigger than the romantic just me and you.
Well, we're talking about it in our group here. I was mentioning to them, I have these two friends that don't know each other from this Lifetime Fitness, but I want to be the matchmaker and bring them together and just to see what kind of chemistry that they would have and that we would have as the three of us.
As the three, yes, absolutely.
But you had another thing too, with reading partners, and you're working with a student and it's not going well, and you're trying to figure out how you can get it to go well.
Yes.
And the site coordinator comes over and gives a little bit of help, advice, changes the tone somewhat. And there's then at the end of that hour that we're their success.
I know that was Nina's experience. Yes, and deeply appreciated that opportunity to share frustration, absolutely, and satisfaction. Anyone else? Any other observations about the way in which this might have implications for your work with Opportunity St. Paul? Or the way Opportunity St. Paul works? Please.
Besides, okay, with mine, I tutor in a library.
Yes.
And it's very nice, I'm not in charge of discipline, I'm a retired teacher. So, middle school, so, I no longer have discipline issues, I no longer have, curriculum issues and all that stuff. I just go in and work with a kid. But there are multiple tutors at the library, and if a kid has more chemistry with one tutor than another, they can switch. And then we also have a coordinator who is there and does all the, no, you can't bring food in, you can't come in, you don't have homework, that kind of stuff. They deal with all that, which is very, very nice and lets us get on with our thing. But another thing besides that is that the strengthening is that other people, like at my church, hear about what we're doing and have started asking about, what could I do? I don't think I could tutor. What could I do? And I go, there are multiple organizations. So I've got one more person who's, I think, going to be kind of joining us, and a couple of others who are thinking about it. Just because they hear people talking about it and multiple people talking about it sucks in another person.
One of the strengths of those multi-sided relationships is the possibility that there's more than one way to do something good. And that's a hopeful message for many who say, I can't do it your way. I have different gifts. I have different inclinations. But I could be part of a larger process.
Yeah, and I was like, that's fine, we have multiple organizations.
Yes,
Well,
Randy.
One more way, so if you're an Opportunity St. Paul volunteer, you're automatically part of two organizations. You're nonprofit partner in Interfaith Action. And the converse is, we're now working with a lot of congregations in Opportunity St. Paul that are Project Home congregations. And people are seeing that you can do Project Home 1 month a year, but then there's still 11 months. And they're wanting to then sign up to do Opportunity St. Paul during the year. And then you get experiences that are different for both.
And as Randy had the wisdom to realize from the beginning, building community this way can only deeply enrich and strengthen the work that you do one-on-one, day-to-day in your volunteer settings. Well, before I have a few closing thoughts, I just want to say in the months to come, we're attempting to enrich and broaden the kind of text study that we're going to be doing. In a couple months, Rabbi Lynn Lieberman, who was a chaplain, will be coming to talk with us about insights in Scripture she learns through chaplaincy. A little later this year, Susan Cherwin, a gifted Lutheran liturgist and hymnal composer, is going to talk about challenges that come with trying to put Scripture into song. Ikram Muhammad, who is an alumna of Opportunity St. Paul. She was one of the group of Hamlin students that came with Deanna Thompson last year to be part of our work, will be coming back to teach a bit of Quran. And I hope that at the end of the year, Professor Mark Bergson can join us with some South Asian scripture, perhaps outside of all of our traditions. But for this evening, a best friend, no doubt about it. A best friend is a precious treasure. But I can tell you, 50 years between those two pictures, it's been my experience that such a friend proves most fruitful and enduring when it is part of a grove of friendships. Two is better than one, but a threefold cord not quickly broken. So with that, I thank you.